Did you know that prolonged exposure to certain forms of psychological manipulation can produce neurological effects similar to a physical brain injury? It's a chilling thought. We spend our golden years hoping for peace, for clarity. Yet, for many, this becomes a time of profound confusion, not because the mind is failing, but because someone they trust is actively working to dismantle their reality, piece by piece. This isn't just a disagreement or a difference of opinion. This is a deliberate, insidious form of psychological warfare known as gaslighting. It's a term you've likely heard, but I assure you, understanding it from a clinical distance is one thing. Recognizing it when it's happening to you, in your own home, from your own child, partner, or caregiver, that is another matter entirely. My name is Arthur Hayes. For 35 years, I made a living inside the interrogation room. I wasn't a Fed, but the Bureau often brought me in on the tough cases, the ones where the subject was a master of turning the tables, of making seasoned agents question their own reports. What I learned in those rooms is that the most dangerous criminals are not always the ones with a weapon in their hand. Sometimes they're the ones who can make you believe the weapon is in your hand. Gaslighting is their primary tool. It's the art of the invisible cage. Let's get the history lesson out of the way, because it matters. The term comes from a 1938 play, Gaslight, where a husband systematically manipulates his wife into believing she's going insane, partly by dimming the gas-powered lights in their home and then denying it's happening. She sees the lights flicker. She feels the change, but he insists, with absolute conviction, that it's all in her head. Her reality crumbles. Why do I, and why did the FBI care so deeply about this? Because it's the cornerstone of coercive control. A suspect who can make an investigator doubt the evidence is a suspect who can walk free. A partner who can make you doubt your own sanity is a partner who can control your finances, your relationships, and your freedom without ever laying a hand on you. The psychological impact is devastating. It starts with self-doubt, then blossoms into a pervasive confusion, and ultimately it destabilizes your entire sense of self. You become an unreliable narrator in your own life story. I remember a case from years back. A woman named Eleanor. Her husband, Richard, was a pillar of the community. Everyone loved him. But Eleanor was convinced she was losing her mind. Objects in the house would move. Appointments she swore were in her calendar would vanish. Richard would tell her stories about conversations they'd had, conversations she had no memory of, and he'd get that look of pitying concern. "Oh, honey," he'd say, "I'm getting worried about you." Her children saw it too. Dad was so patient with Mom's forgetfulness. It wasn't until her daughter noticed that her father was the only one who ever witnessed these lapses that things started to click. Richard was systematically erasing his wife's confidence to get power of attorney and liquidate her assets. He was dimming the gaslights, and no one else could see the flicker. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling more confused than when you started, questioning your own memory of events? Psychologically, the manipulator is creating something called cognitive dissonance, the intense mental discomfort of holding two conflicting beliefs. The belief that I remember this happening clashes with the belief that this person I trust says it didn't. To resolve that discomfort, it often feels easier to abandon your own perception than to accept the terrifying alternative, that someone you love is lying to your face to control you. Once you understand the goal of the gaslighter, to shatter your reality for their own gain, you can begin to identify the specific tools they use. Think of them less as conversational tics and more as precision-guided munitions aimed directly at your sense of self. The first two, and often the most common, are what I call the twin hammers, denial and deflection. They work in tandem, a brutal 1-2 punch designed to exhaust you into submission. The first hammer, denial, is the simplest and most audacious. It's a flat, unwavering rejection of reality. I never said that. That didn't happen. You're making things up. The power of this tactic lies in its sheer audacity. It's so absolute, so contrary to your own clear memory, that it makes you pause. Could I be wrong? Did I dream it? A normal person might say, I don't remember saying that, or I think you misunderstood me. The gaslighter offers no such nuance. It is a brick wall of absolute negation. The key I taught young detectives to look for is the pattern. Anyone can misremember something once. But when a person consistently and flatly denies events that you know for a fact occurred, especially when those events are convenient for them to deny, you are no longer dealing with a faulty memory. You are dealing with a deliberate tactic. The second hammer, which almost always follows a failed attempt at denial, is deflection. The moment you push back, the moment you hold firm to your reality, no, I am certain you said you would pay that bill, the subject changes. The conversation is no longer about the bill. Suddenly, it's about you. Why are you always hounding me about money? You're just trying to start a fight because you're stressed about work. After everything I do for you, this is the thanks I get? You accusing me of being irresponsible? Notice the shift. Your legitimate query has been reframed as a flaw in your character. You are now the attacker, the untrusting one, the aggressor. You find yourself defending your motives instead of discussing the original issue. This is an incredibly effective interrogation countermeasure, and it's devastating in a personal relationship. It derails progress and turns every attempt at accountability into a referendum on your right to even ask the question. I worked a fraud case involving a fellow named Mickey, a real slippery character. We had him dead to rights on a check-kiting scheme. We had copies of the checks, bank statements, surveillance photos of him at the ATM. We'd lay a photo on the table and say, Mickey, this is you on Tuesday at the Third National Bank. He'd look at it, look at us, and say with a perfectly straight face, that's not me. Just a flat denial. When we'd press, showing him a driver's license photo for comparison, the deflection would start. You guys are always trying to pin things on the little guy. Why don't you go after those crooks on Wall Street? You think you can just harass a man who's had a tough life? In 10 seconds, we went from discussing a felony to debating the socio-economic policies of the United States. He was a master. In a more domestic setting, this could be asking your partner about a suspicious text message you saw, only to be told, I can't believe you were snooping on my phone. What kind of person does that? All my trust in you is gone. The original issue of the text message is now buried under an avalanche of your supposed misconduct. How often does a simple question you ask turn into an argument about your character instead of their actions? The psychological mechanism here is cognitive overload. By rapidly denying and then deflecting, the gaslighter forces your brain to switch tracks, to process a new, emotionally charged accusation. It triggers a defensive emotional response, short-circuiting your logical brain and making it nearly impossible to return to the original point. They're not winning the argument, they're making the argument impossible to have. If denial and deflection are the brute force tools of the gaslighter, the next two tactics are far more insidious. They require more finesse, more artistry. This is where the manipulator moves from being a demolition expert to a bomb disposal technician, carefully weaving their reality into yours until you can no longer tell the wires apart. I'm talking about the technique of blending lies with truth and its close cousin, the act of trivializing your feelings. These methods don't just attack your memory, they attack your intuition and your emotional core. The first, blending lies with the truth, is perhaps the most disorienting tactic of all. A complete fabrication is often easy to spot. It doesn't align with anything you know, but a lie that is wrapped in a kernel of truth or a narrative that is 80% factual but has one or two critical details altered is incredibly difficult to dismantle. The manipulator builds a story on a foundation of verifiable facts, gaining your trust and agreement, and then slips their poison into the mix. Because you agree with the foundation, your brain is predisposed to accept the whole structure. I once tracked a con artist named Julian, who specialized in bilking wealthy retirees. He was brilliant at this. He'd approach a potential mark with a business proposition, and he would have done his homework. He would talk about real market trends, reference actual news articles, and mention mutual acquaintances. Everything he said for the first hour would be completely true and easily verifiable. He'd build a powerful sense of credibility and rapport. Then he'd introduce the lie, the exclusive, can't-miss investment opportunity that was, of course, a complete fiction. His victims' minds, having been lulled into a state of agreement, couldn't easily spot the weld between the truth and the fabrication. It all sounded equally plausible. This happens in personal relationships constantly. A spouse recounting an argument might say, "And then we were in the kitchen. It was Tuesday night. You were wearing your blue sweater, and you said you hated my mother." 3 of those facts are true. You were in the kitchen. It was Tuesday. You were wearing that sweater. But you never said you hated his mother. Yet, because the other details are so accurate, you begin to doubt your own memory of that one crucial, fabricated detail. It's a poisoned well. They make you drink the clean water before you realize the whole source is contaminated. Now, if you manage to see through the half-truths and you call them on it, the next tool comes out, trivializing your feelings. You express hurt, confusion, or anger, and your emotional response is dismissed as invalid. You're being too sensitive. You're overreacting. It was just a joke. You need to lighten up. This is a profoundly cruel tactic. It not only denies the validity of the event that caused your emotion, but it denies the validity of the emotion itself. It recasts your legitimate reaction as a character flaw. You are not hurt because they did something hurtful. You're hurt because you are pathologically sensitive. It's a way of saying, your internal guidance system is broken. I saw this with a manager in a corporate espionage case. He would consistently take credit for his subordinates' work in meetings. When the young man, let's call him David, finally got the courage to confront him, the manager didn't deny it. He trivialized it. "Oh, David, don't be so dramatic. We're a team. It's not about who gets the credit. You're getting too hung up on the little things. You need to see the bigger picture." In one stroke, he framed David's valid complaint about intellectual property theft as a petty, emotional overreaction. Has anyone ever made you feel like your perfectly reasonable emotions were, in fact, a sign of instability? The psychology here is potent. Humans rely on their emotions as a primary data stream about the world. When someone convinces you that this data stream is unreliable, you lose trust in yourself. By exploiting the brain's desire for coherence with partial truths, and then invalidating the emotional alarm bells that go off, the gaslighter methodically severs the connection you have with your own intuition. We've covered the gaslighter's verbal assaults, the denials, deflections, and deceptions. But some of their most powerful techniques involve no words at all, or they involve using the presence of others as a weapon against you. These are the tactics of last resort, the ones used to completely shut down communication and to socially isolate you until you have no choice but to surrender to their reality. I'm talking about the twin walls they build around you, the wall of silence, known as stonewalling, and the wall of shame, which I call public gaslighting. Stonewalling is the ultimate expression of passive-aggressive control. It's the refusal to engage, the deliberate withdrawal, the sudden inability to understand. You try to discuss a serious issue, and they simply shut down. They might physically leave the room, put on headphones, or stare at their phone. Or, more subtly, they'll just give you a blank look and say, "I don't know what you're talking about," or "I'm not having this conversation right now." It is not a request to talk later when tempers have cooled it as an indefinite shutdown. It's a punishment. You are, in effect, being placed in solitary confinement. Your concerns are so invalid they are not even worthy of a response. In the interrogation room, we called this playing dumb. A suspect would simply refuse to answer or claim not to understand even the simplest questions. It's a tactic designed to frustrate the questioner into giving up. The psychological message is one of profound contempt. It says, "You are not important enough for my energy. Your thoughts and feelings are meaningless. In a relationship, this is devastating. It denies the possibility of resolution. How can you solve a problem with someone who refuses to even acknowledge the problem exists? It leaves you alone with your feelings, which then begin to fester. You start to wonder, am I the crazy one for wanting to talk about this? Is this issue really not a big deal? The gaslighter's silence creates a vacuum, and you, in your distress, will rush to fill it with self-doubt. It's an incredibly effective way to win a fight without ever throwing a punch. Then there is the even more sinister tactic: public gaslighting. This is when the manipulator takes their campaign of destabilization on the road. They will deliberately provoke you or lie about you in front of friends, family, or even strangers, and then use the public setting as a shield. They might make a cutting, belittling joke at your expense at a dinner party. When you react with hurt or anger, they feign innocence and turn to the audience. "Wow, can't you take a joke? Lighten up. Everyone else thought it was funny." They put you in an impossible position. If you escalate the situation, you look like the unstable, aggressive one who is ruining the party. If you stay silent, you are forced to swallow the humiliation, and the gaslighter's narrative that you're overly sensitive is validated by the silence of the onlookers. They use the social pressure of the group to force your compliance. I consulted on a bitter divorce case where a husband, a very prominent man, would use this tactic masterfully. At social events, if his wife expressed an opinion he disagreed with, he wouldn't argue with her. He would simply smile paternally, pat her on the arm, and say to their friends, "You'll have to forgive her. She gets these fanciful ideas in her head. It's quite charming, really." He painted her as a delightful but delusional child in front of everyone she knew. Her credibility was eroded, not with an argument, but with a condescending smile. Have you ever felt trapped by someone's silence or embarrassed into submission in front of others? These tactics are about isolation. Stonewalling isolates you emotionally, while public gaslighting isolates you socially. Both are designed to make you feel utterly alone in your perception of reality, which is the gaslighter's ultimate goal. When you are alone, you are controllable. All right, we've spent enough time in the dark, dissecting the manipulator's toolkit. Now, let's turn on the lights. Recognizing the tactics is a crucial first step, but it's a passive one. The real work begins when you decide to move from victim to investigator. In my line of work, you don't defeat a lie by arguing with it, you defeat it by building a case so strong, so rooted in objective fact, that the lie collapses under its own weight. This is how you must approach reclaiming your reality. Your first two actions are to build a fortress of evidence. Your tools are documentation and external validation. These are not acts of aggression, they are acts of profound self-preservation. Documentation is your most powerful weapon against a crumbling memory. Gaslighters thrive in the fog of "he said, she said." Your job is to clear the fog with cold, hard, undeniable facts. Start a private journal, a log on your computer, or even a secure file in the cloud. After every confusing or upsetting interaction, write down exactly what happened as dispassionately as possible. What was said? What was done? When and where did it happen? Who was present? Be a court reporter for your own life. Record the facts, not your emotional interpretation of them. For instance, instead of writing, "He was a jerk to me again," write, "On September 23rd at 8:15 p.m. in the living room, I asked him if he had paid the electric bill. He responded, 'I never told you I would pay it.' I then referenced our conversation from September 18th where he had agreed to. He then said, 'You are always making things up to start fights.'" This might seem tedious, but it serves two vital purposes. First, it externalizes your memory. It takes it out of your head, where it can be manipulated, and puts it onto paper, where it is fixed and unchangeable. When you start to doubt yourself a week later, you can go back to your log and see the reality of the situation in black and white. Second, it reveals patterns. A single incident can be dismissed, But a logbook showing the same pattern of denial and deflection happening every Tuesday for 3 months is not an anomaly, it is a strategy. I go back to the case of Eleanor, the woman whose husband was trying to drive her mad. Her daughter started this process. She kept a simple diary of her father's contradictions. She started taking date-stamped photos of where her mother left her keys, so when her father claimed she'd lost them again, they had proof. That simple logbook was the first piece of concrete evidence that allowed Eleanor to trust her own mind again. What's one small step you could take today to start keeping a record of the facts? The second part of building your fortress is external validation. A gaslighter's primary strategy is to isolate you. They want to be the sole arbiter of your reality. You must break this isolation. You need to find a trusted, neutral third party, not someone who will always take your side, but someone who will give you an honest reflection of reality. This could be a longtime friend, a sibling, or, ideally, a professional therapist. The conversation isn't about complaining or seeking pity. It's about verification. You present the facts from your logbook. This is what happened. He said X, I said Y. My reaction was to feel hurt. Does that seem like an overreaction to you? A good friend will say, "No, that sounds incredibly hurtful. Anyone would be upset by that." A therapist can go even further, helping you identify the specific manipulative tactics being used. This process is called triangulation. In investigations, we never rely on a single source. We always look for multiple, independent sources to verify a fact. You must do the same for your own sanity. Hearing a trusted person confirm that your perceptions are reasonable is like a cool drink of water in a desert of confusion. It reaffirms that your internal compass is not broken. The combination is powerful. Documentation provides the objective evidence, and external validation provides the subjective confirmation. Together, they create a foundation of reality so solid that no amount of manipulation can crack it. Building your case with documentation and validation is the defensive part of the operation. It's about building your fortress and knowing where you stand. But you cannot live your life inside a fortress. The next phase is about going on the offensive, not by attacking, but by reclaiming your territory. You have to take back control of your own space, your own mind, and your own conversations. This requires two of the most difficult but most empowering actions you can take: setting firm boundaries and actively practicing reality anchoring. A boundary is not a request, it's a declaration. It is you defining the line of acceptable behavior and stating, clearly and calmly, what will happen if that line is crossed. Gaslighters hate boundaries because boundaries represent a loss of their control. They are used to operating in a world of ambiguity and emotional chaos. A firm boundary is a clear, bright line they cannot manipulate. This is not about winning an argument. In fact, it's about refusing to have the argument on their terms. When the gaslighter begins to use one of their tactics, trivializing your feelings, for example, you deploy a boundary. When you say, "I'm too sensitive," you are dismissing my feelings. I will not continue a conversation where my feelings are belittled. If you do it again, I am going to walk away. The key here is the follow-through. The first time you state the boundary, they will almost certainly test it. They will call you too sensitive again, perhaps even immediately, to see if you are serious. And in that moment, you must execute the consequence. You must say, calmly and without anger, "I told you I would not continue this conversation," and then you must physically leave the room. No further debate, no final parting shot. You simply enforce the boundary. I once consulted on a witness intimidation case where a young man was being relentlessly harassed by a defendant's family. They would call him, twisting his words, telling him he was confused. I told him, "You do not have to participate. The next time they call, you say, 'I'm not discussing this with you,' and hang up." It took him 3 tries to do it without arguing, but once he did, the power dynamic shifted entirely. He took back control. What is one boundary you know you need to set, but have been afraid to enforce? The second practice, reality anchoring, is something you do for yourself, especially in the heat of a confusing interaction. When you feel that familiar fog of doubt and confusion rolling in, you need to ground yourself in the physical, objective world. This is a technique agents use to stay calm under extreme pressure. It's a mental reset. Focus on your senses. What are 5 things you can see right now? Name them in your head. The lamp, the blue rug, the crack in the ceiling. What are 4 things you can physically feel? The hard back of the chair, the warmth of your coffee mug, the texture of your jeans, your feet flat on the floor. What are 3 things you can hear? The hum of the refrigerator, a car passing outside, the sound of your own breathing. This simple exercise pulls your brain out of the chaotic, emotionally charged narrative the gaslighter is trying to create and anchors it in the present, undeniable reality. Your feelings are getting tangled, but the chair is still solid. The coffee is still hot. You are still here. This internal practice reinforces the idea that there is an objective reality separate from the manipulator's version of it. It's a way of silently telling yourself, my perception of the world around me is accurate and reliable, therefore, my perception of this conversation may also be accurate and reliable. Setting boundaries reestablishes your agency in the external world. Reality anchoring reestablishes your trust in your internal world. Together, they are the 1-2 punch that allows you to stand firm in the face of manipulation and begin to take your life back. Let's bring this all together. We've journeyed through the murky landscape of the gaslighter's mind, and we've illuminated the weapons they use. We've dissected the crude force of denial and deflection, the surgical precision of blending lies with truth and trivializing your feelings, and the isolating power of stonewalling and public gaslighting. These are not random acts of unkindness. They are a calculated, systematic campaign to erode your reality, break down your confidence, and establish control. Seeing them for what they are, a deliberate set of tactics, is the most critical step toward freedom. It moves the problem from what is wrong with me to what is this person doing to me. That shift in perspective is everything. It is the beginning of you taking back your power. But recognition, as I've said, is only half the battle. Knowledge without action is just a library of unread books. The strategies we've discussed are your action plan. They are your way out of the fog. You start by becoming the lead investigator in your own life. You build your case through meticulous documentation, creating an unshakable record of the truth that stands firm against the winds of manipulation. You break the painful isolation by seeking external validation from trusted sources, allowing their clarity to reinforce your own. This is how you build your fortress of reality. Then you move from defense to offense. You learn to set and enforce firm boundaries, drawing clear lines about what treatment you will and will not accept, and you reclaim your conversational territory. And in moments of doubt, you ground yourself with reality anchoring, reconnecting with the physical world to reaffirm the reliability of your own mind. These aren't easy steps. They require immense courage. The gaslighter in your life, be it a spouse, a child, a boss, or a friend, will not give up their control easily. They will likely escalate their behavior when they feel it slipping away. They may call you crazy, selfish, or cruel for daring to question their narrative. This is the final test. This is the moment where you must hold on to your documented reality and your validated feelings, and you must choose to trust yourself over the person who has been systematically trying to make you distrust yourself. I've seen countless people in my career, strong, intelligent, capable people, who have been brought to their knees by this kind of manipulation. I've also had the privilege of seeing what happens when they finally decide to fight back, when they start logging the lies, when they make that first call to a friend, when they hang up the phone or walk out of the room for the first time. It is like watching someone walk out of a dark room into the sun. It is a slow and sometimes painful adjustment, but it is a return to the life that was stolen from them. This knowledge is a heavy thing to carry. It will change how you see the world and the people in it. Use it wisely. Use it to protect yourself and those you care about. But most importantly, use it. Don't just understand it, act on it. Your reality is worth fighting for. Thank you for your time and attention. If this has been helpful, I encourage you to subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Next time, we'll be taking a closer look at something the agents at Quantico spend months mastering: how to spot the truth and lies written on a person's face through micro-expressions. You won't want to miss it.